So again, breakdown of Romans. Again, chapters 1 to 11 is the why, the theology. 12 to 16 is the so what, the praxis. So please, if you learn anything from this class, please follow that pattern in your sermons, in your preaching, the why and the what. So if you look at the big picture of Romans, it starts with the problem. That's what the gospel actually confronts, the biblical sin. But it confronts it with hope, with the offer of biblical solution. And then it goes into the so what. And we just saw that now. The problem, the solution, the so what. But notice even the problem, and we'll look at this in the next session, the problem is framed within the gospel itself. And I think, Bijal, you said, reading Romans 1:18 to 27, it seems like we are wicked, we're just bad people. We'll get to that in our next session, because the presentation of the gospel actually matters a lot. And in fact, it matters in the long run, and hopefully we'll see it in our next session. Praying for each one to hear the gospel afresh. It was interesting. Yesterday I had a chat with someone, and was it yesterday? No, day before. Losing track of days. And young campus student, and going through some very, very hard stuff. And I didn't know how to ask this question, and I asked, and I realized I offended this person. Maybe you guys can help me come up with a better way to ask the question. The question I asked this person is, have you heard the gospel? And this person's been a disciple for for a few years, and like, of course I've heard the gospel. What do you mean? Yeah. And then even this morning I was telling Angie that, my wife, for those you don't know, and she was offended. She's like, of course I've heard the gospel. Well, I've been, and it's like, no, I'm trying to understand how to ask that question. And maybe she said, oh, you can maybe ask, can you describe the gospel, or what does the gospel mean to you? Maybe you guys can help unpack that, help me with the question. But the question is just that, how is the gospel shaping you? What is the gospel? I don't even know how to ask, you know what I mean? But it's that sense of, we have to be shaped by this new reality in our innermost beings. That's me, you, leaders, all the younger. And I think that's part of what you're saying, Jake, is praying for one another to encounter the gospel, to be inspired by gospel. And that's why I said gospel preaching, gospel perspective is a bridge. It's not a high wall. Because that's what Jesus has done. If I'm really striving to practice the effects of the gospel, I want to share redemption with you. Redemption is freedom. Redemption, and we'll talk more about that in subsequent sessions. Does that make sense? And that's where I'm landing on, is we just have to pray that each one of us is impacted by gospel afresh, regardless of how long we've been a Christian or what our roles are. And that would include sharing the gospel with leaders. Do not underestimate your impact. Do not underestimate your impact. Yes, I mean that. And I would love to hear from you. How would we share the gospel with those who have heard the gospel? And so Jabez said this yesterday. We both laughed, but I think he's right. He said we need to preach the gospel to Christians more. And we both just bust out laughing, because it sounds so silly. Yeah. Till you recognize, who was Romans written to? Yeah. Who is the audience to really the New Testament? To Gentiles or to non-Christians? It's to Christians. Yeah. And so maybe there's something there we have to really take seriously. It's like what Jake and I were speaking earlier. Our Sunday services, we have to pray wisely. How would we bring the gospel or preach the gospel and teach the gospel so the churches, the members of Christians can really be inspired by the gospel afresh? And I think striving to avoid the assumption that you need to know better because you're a baptized disciple. That would literally be like Paul telling the church in Rome, you guys need to know better because you're a baptized disciple. Instead he writes 16 chapters, Maybe there's something instructive there for us also.